This is a market with a major paradox. In fact, it is an immensely large and growing market. You see, the alternative protein market is worth $20 billion. It has been growing for a long time. As it was full of promise in recent decades, today there is a wave of doubt surrounding this market since some flagship companies have made unkept promises. More than 1 in 2 Europeans say they want to make their diet more plant-based. And then, if you like, the tension and the paradox I mentioned is that you also have 55% of these Europeans who say they avoid plant-based meat because they consider it too processed. It is the consumer's fear of asking, will I be eating healthily? Will I develop deficiencies? And for us at Edonia, that is exactly what we address because we are the only offer on the market that manages to combine this high level of naturalness with extraordinary nutritional performance that even exceeds that of meat in terms of protein content.
Hi, Hugo. You
Hi,
are
Antonin.
the co-founder and CEO of Edonia, an industrial deep tech company in the alternative protein sector. So we are going to talk about that today. We will specifically discuss your capital expenditure light industrialization strategy. But first, the alternative protein sector is not exactly thriving right now.
It is a market with a major paradox. In fact, it is an immensely large and growing market. You see, the alternative protein market is worth $20 billion. It has been growing for a long time. As it was full of promise in recent decades, today, there is a movement of doubt around this market since a few flagship companies, that's the case for Beyond Meat, for example, have made promises that were not kept. So it is a market that is large and where the proposition made to consumers does not yet perfectly meet his demand, so where there is a lot to be done. Well, with Edonia, and I'll have the chance to tell you about it, we fit perfectly into this new generation that is taking advantage of the rebound. You see, after a big hype cycle, we are at a moment of recovery for this market, and we are among the companies that will invent the renewal. And I sincerely believe it, the offers that will truly find the fit with what consumers expect.
Because this market has existed for over 10 years, since even before Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger, right?
Exactly, Impossible Foods. Actually, we believe we are in the era of the third generation of these protein alternatives. The first was what appeared in the 80s and 90s based on soy, so tofu, things that promised a more plant-based diet with taste experiences that were sometimes a little difficult for the consumer. And that is when, if you like, the new generation appeared, driven by players like Beyond Meat, for example, who made the promise you will not see the difference from meat. We will create things from protein sources like peas or soy that will look exactly like a steak, to the point where, as a consumer, you will feel like you are eating meat. And they did it with innovative food processes, sometimes with ultra-processing, using many ingredients. From an organoleptic point of view, it works quite well. I think you would be fooled by it too. Today, well, these companies are struggling a bit because this race to mimic meat, they did it at the cost of being unable to reach price parity with the products they were trying to replace. The use of ultra-processing, which today is really at odds with the actual expectations of consumers, and so they are losing momentum because they are ultimately misaligned with the deep aspirations of consumers who are looking to make their diet plant-based, certainly, but to do so increasingly with healthy, minimally processed ingredients, single ingredients, and authentic experiences. We are in a market shift where, in fact, we are no longer really trying to create things that look exactly like meat, but rather good plant-based food with real flavors, real tastes, and nutritional quality without going through these hyper-processing methods. So that explains the difficulty these companies are facing. It is price positioning that is hard to align with consumer expectations, industrial models that were sometimes too grandiose for the reality of the market's maturity, and a few elements of consumer disappointment. And so the third generation is the one Edonia is part of, the one that takes authentic, healthier, still delicious plant-based food, but goes beyond just mimicking meat.
Do consumers really want to make their diets plant-based? Does this concern everyone? Is it massive?
It is massive. More than 1 in 2 Europeans say they want to make their diet more plant-based. So you really have a clear and definite movement on that. And then, if you like, the tension and the paradox I mentioned is that you also have 55% of these Europeans who say they avoid plant-based meat because they consider it too processed. So you find a bit of the imbalance I mentioned between what is offered to consumers and their real expectations. And it is mainly for this reason that meat alternatives, the imitations, have only taken 1% of the market share of that entire market. And that, if you will, given the climate urgency we have to transition to plant-based our diet, is much too slow. And that is why we, as entrepreneurs at Edonia, are part of this movement. It is to create solutions that help accelerate this movement, which the consumer wants and which we need as a society to minimize the environmental impact of our food system.
And at the same time, we are seeing growth in the lentil and legume sector because that really resolves this tension, the fact of having both a natural product and at the same time one that is higher in protein.
Exactly. So it is part of this movement to offer a plant-based, healthier and simpler plant-based option, also more readable, from an ingredient list perspective. The limitation we have with legumes is their lower nutritional content compared to meat. We work a lot with institutional catering, for example, which is looking for unprocessed solutions to make school cafeteria menus more plant-based. When you create a bolognese, to take that example, and you're told, well, we're going to replace the ground meat with lentils. The fact is you need to use 2 or 3 times more lentils than you would have used of ground meat. So that makes plant-based options complex if you want to provide as much protein as a meal for school cafeteria kids should have. But with legumes, you struggle to find enough nutrients compared to meat. So that has always been a hurdle for plant-based food to gain market share from meat. It is sometimes justified fear, right, for consumers to wonder, will I be eating healthily? Will I create deficiencies? Will I manage to provide enough protein and micronutrients on the plates to effectively make a menu plant-based? And at Edonia, well, that is exactly what we address, because we are the only offer on the market that manages to combine this high level of naturalness with extraordinary nutritional performance, which even exceeds that of meat in terms of protein content, a promise that, we are the only ones making on this market today.
And how do you crack the subject of naturalness? What I understand is that naturalness is the opposite of ultra processing.
Exactly, that is how we define it.
And so how do you do that?
What is considered ultra-processed is the use of controversial ingredients. I am thinking of methyl cellulose, for example, which is a texturizing agent that is widely used to make plant-based meat, or selective fragmentation. It means saying, in soy, for example, I will extract and isolate the protein to then use an extrusion process that will make it puff up to create texture. I will add flavorings on top, so it starts to taste a bit more like meat. So that is what is called the ultra processing methods in plant-based food.
Are there degrees? Are there degrees of ultra processing where you, as soon as you pass a certain threshold?
There are scales that define it, and then there are labels that prove it. For example, we work with the GUM agency, which awarded us a simple ingredients label that defines this category of ingredients that are not the result of ultra processing. How do we go about meeting this consumer expectation? Well, first of all, we work with a specific material, microalgae. I will have the opportunity to come back to that, I think. And then we created a patented process called hedonization, which allows us to create taste and texture without using additives, extraction or extrusion methods, without any flavorings, without any texturizing agents. And that is how we transform spirulina into an ingredient we call Edo, which has unique characteristics and delivers taste, texture, and nutritional performance with a very high level of naturalness.
And so how do you go about that in concrete terms?
Well, look, if you want a starting point for us, it's saying there is an extraordinary substance on Earth, which is microalgae. We have known for decades, for example, that spirulina is the most nutritious food on our planet, very rich in protein, very rich in micronutrients. These are materials that are also, we know how to grow them with a very low environmental impact. You need little water, little energy, little space to produce truly extraordinary protein yields. And on top of that, these materials are already authorized for human consumption. Because with spirulina, you have several decades of history of consumption as a food supplement. You have supply systems, people who actually know how to grow it all over the planet, hundreds of spirulina farms. So you have a form of availability for this material. However, there is no mainstream food use for microalgae. And that is really the problem that, as entrepreneurs, has really obsessed us. Meaning, if we have every reason in the world to eat it for our health, for environmental benefits, and this material is available, how is it that we don't find it more often on our plates?
It is an ingredient that was present in ancestral cultures that was already consumed on a large scale in the past.
Yes, well, first of all, it is the earliest form of life on Earth, 3.5 billion years. It is the first organisms that appeared on our planet. So it is truly the foundation of our entire food system and of all the development of life on Earth. And then, we know that it is a substance that was consumed by the Mayans and the Incas a few millennia before Jesus Christ. And then we have traces in human history, in Chad, notably in the 800s, up to the 1970s, actually, where archaeological research helped uncover the history of spirulina consumption. So we eventually found this substance in lakes in Mexico. Scientists performed nutritional analysis and realized it was the most nutritious food on our planet. And that started a movement to popularize these substances as we learned to replicate their cultivation methods, essentially creating a form of agriculture. We can call it algaculture in this case, meaning, cultivating this substance outside of its natural state to domesticate its cultivation and use. And then, many humanitarian movements initially, the UN, UNESCO took up the subject and developed humanitarian farms. And then, popularity as a natural food supplement, used in the West, mainly of spirulina as a supplement, to say, I am going to eat a tiny bit every morning to get some good quality protein, an antioxidant effect, lots of iron, other micronutrients.
Yes, there's a bit of a magic ingredient fiber in the same style as other ingredients on the market. No, you are consuming it before creating Edonia.
Absolutely. Since I was a teenager, actually, it was something that came into my family home through the advice of a naturopath, and so I had this first contact from a very young age with this substance, with the use of food supplements whose benefits I perceived on the performance of my immune system, which led me to continue. So I have a rather personal and intimate relationship with the subject I am currently working on, and it is through these years of consumption experience that my focus shifted to this subject. The questions I then raised about production models intersected with my aspirations to start a business in sustainable food. So it greatly contributed to creating in my mind what became Edonia. Yes.
Tell us about the genesis. When you make the link between your personal consumption and a potential business opportunity, what are you doing at that time? What year are we in?
I have a business background. At that time, I was in my first few years of my career, so I was an account director at a marketing consulting agency. I worked a lot for Heineken, providing consulting for the French marketing teams. And overall, I did business-to-business sales for major accounts.
On advertising?
On brand experience and operations, marketing strategy operations, more broadly. It's a moment in my life where I want to start a business in something that makes sense to me. Sustainable food quickly became the obvious choice. And when I was looking for my topic, I thought back to the times I consumed spirulina. And what really, when I researched how we can produce microalgae with such a low environmental impact, that's what really shook me, this realization of saying, but this is one of the best materials from a health perspective. We know how to grow it with such a low environmental impact. It seems to me that this is precisely what society needs. Why aren't we eating it? And if you like, the answer to that question is quite obvious. And I had experienced it personally. Spirulina today, as it is offered on the market, is green, dehydrated, dry powders, possibly re-agglomerated into tablets, so you can swallow it easily with an extremely strong taste and smell. So as soon as I see agribusiness professionals and ask them, why don't you develop food products using these ingredients? The answer is immediate. It is the taste experience. We cannot develop palatable products from these materials because the taste barrier is too strong. So that is the moment I set my mind to solving that problem. We are going to create an appetizing consumption experience for the consumer, and that will be the only way to democratize these materials, since, humans choose their food through their senses. We are drawn to food with our eyes, our nose, and then our palate. So there's no reason why these materials, as virtuous as they may be from an environmental or health perspective, should be an exception to this rule, this unwavering rule of how humans eat. So that's how I set out on this path.
And when you launch your discovery, you're not sure it can work?
No, at that moment, I have no idea. I have a few intuitions, if you like. Any food that you can look at around you, obviously, if your only downstream process is to dehydrate it, to turn it into powder. If I give you an apple in that form, you will want it less than biting into something juicy or baking it in a pie to enjoy the candied aspects that cooking will generate. So it is somewhat obvious to say that the current offering is not made to serve the consumer in terms of taste experience. So there is already a bit of intuition. And then, well, that is how my entrepreneurial journey begins, going to dig deeper, going to see experts and realizing that, this ingredient, before it is dehydrated, is actually tasty. I start by creating a first company based on that. On that logic, we develop finished products for the consumer, sauces, spreads with fresh spirulina to prove that you can really enjoy yourself with this ingredient, and that it is possible to cook with this product for the first time in the history of its consumption. We managed to get it into gourmet grocery stores and fine restaurants. So we demonstrate that, yes, there are culinary uses for these ingredients if we are innovative in how we process them. And that is what crystallizes our convictions that we can democratize these ingredients on a larger scale. And that is what subsequently led to the creation of Edonia.
So the first company, you started with one of your current co-founders. And it's, what year are we in?
We are in 2020, 2021 at that time.
And so there you are developing a small, rather high-end business where you're going to target fine dining establishments.
And premium and organic retailers. So we are rolling out our products in the aisles of Biocoop, Naturalia, those kinds of chains. It is a founding moment for us because, as I was telling you, we are demonstrating that it works in terms of taste. We spend a huge amount of time in contact with the consumer. In concrete terms, we do tastings on the weekends in these stores. So we ask people about their relationship with microalgae, with sustainable food. We ask them what they expect from these products, what they think of the taste. So we gather a huge amount of feedback actually from the consumer that is extremely useful to me today in my sales, B2B sales strategies. And well, there you go. It's a first entrepreneurial experience. It validates a fit with my partner Pierre. We're doing a sort of draft. Let's say we're learning a huge amount about what it means to start companies, to be an entrepreneur, and we build a network, an ecosystem, a momentum that is then the fertile ground for creating Edonia a few years later.
And how do you go from one to the other?
Look, if you want, this is this phase, the idea is to say we wanted more in terms of impact. We wanted more in terms of the model. We were making finished products for niche uses, appetizer products, sauces, yet we felt the real need, if we want a concrete impact on our food system, is to offer solutions that enable protein transition, that enable the plant-based transition, and therefore concretely substitute high-impact materials, meat, beef, for example. So it is really a desire to seek environmental and societal impact that drives us to try to change our model. And that is what we are doing today. By positioning ourselves as an ingredient supplier, we have a much greater impact because we can serve major players who own powerful brands that are already widely distributed. By creating a technology that allows us to create a new food, we have a much greater potential for impact than by making a finished product. And then we realized that in terms of a business model, it was something that also fit our personalities much better. So it is really this drive toward a position in the value chain where we can have the most impact possible that justified this path and the creation of Edonia.
And when we talk about tech, where do you stand with patents? What is protected today, and who are the first clients?
Regarding the technology, today we created Edonia in March 2023. We spent a lot of time in the lab with researchers from AgroParisTech, developing this process that allows us to transform raw microalgae biomass into an appetizing ingredient that is practical for manufacturers to use. This process created at the laboratory scale. What we have done in recent years is protect it with a patent that protects the product and the process parameters that allow us to achieve the characteristics of this product. And then we transferred it to the industrial scale. So this goes through a factory, a demonstration plant, an industrial pilot that is operational at the Agropole in Agen in the southwest of France, which allows us today to create the first pallets, the first tons of our product, and to deliver to our first clients. So we are currently at a TRL 7, meaning the technology has already moved to the pre-industrial scale. The next step in our roadmap will be to build factories. I will have the opportunity to tell you how we plan to do it. And from the perspective of our clients' usage maturity, well, we have delivered to our first clients who have implemented the product in their central kitchens, in their own factories, and who have served the consumer with very high levels of satisfaction. So we have already, if you like, completed the entire loop from microalgae cultivation, our own processing in our workshops, delivered to the client who implemented it themselves to serve it to the consumers who really enjoyed what they were served.
When you say you enjoyed it, what makes you say that?
The operation that we on a large scale that we did first with our client Newrest. So Newrest, that is nearly 4 billion euros in revenue in about 50 countries. It is a leader in catering services.
It's
with
like
them,
Sodexo.
exactly. It is the same business model. With them, we worked on making school cafeteria menus more plant-based. So we served Edo, our protein ingredient, used in a bolognese sauce served over pasta in a school cafeteria.
Instead of meat?
Ground meat, yes. I saw with my own eyes the children in that canteen enjoying what they were served and asking for seconds when it was offered. So that was a quite foundational moment in this entrepreneurial journey to actually see the loop close, right up to the final consumer experience with an audience that is unbiased, very, very honest, and truly driven by their experience, which are children.
Did they realize it wasn't meat? And did we tell them? We told them?
Yes, because our mission is not to mimic the meat experience. We want to offer an ingredient for plant-based cooking that is good and authentic without necessarily having it taste or feel exactly like meat. So we are not operating on a logic of deception.
What was written on the menu?
Edo Bolognese. Edo is the name of our product. And I think that on the menus with a bit more detail, the word spirulina appeared, which is, as it happens, how we must legally label the products. So if you like, the subject of validating the experience, well, that was a very great moment for us and for our clients to see that, well, the desirability of the offer was there, that the satisfaction was real, well, that the children were coming back for seconds. It allowed us to continue our development and above all to demonstrate that we could bet on microalgae to make diets more plant-based, which, by the way, is a world first. It is the first time that a meal is served where the only source of protein is microalgae. So to trace the journey through humanity since the Incas and Mayans and their use as a food supplement, well, at the end of 2025, we marked a real turning point by saying, in a meal served in a school canteen, we have microalgae that make up the only source of protein in the dish. We are not talking about a use where we integrate 1 or 2% of spirulina into a niche protein bar to supplement an athlete. We managed to demonstrate our vision, which consists of, while being able to bet on microalgae as an alternative protein for the general public, truly mainstream.
But then I think to myself, that must be incredibly expensive. Is it economically sustainable?
It is economically sustainable. You know, institutional catering and school catering are market areas that are quite constrained by price. So demonstrating this in that market was also for us about proving economic efficiency. Very concretely, an operator works with extremely tight budgets to serve a meal in institutional catering, less than €1 per portion. So the first discussion we have with our prospects and clients is about efficiency, specifically price efficiency. Today, we are able to be more competitive than the meat we are looking to replace. So in concrete terms, when a manufacturer replaces ground meat with Edo, they are at least at parity and they start saving money given the rise in meat prices for a fairly simple reason, which is that Edo delivers more protein than meat. So the manufacturer will need to use a little less than they would of meat to reach their nutritional value target. Therefore, in terms of usage cost, the cost of using our ingredients, thanks to its protein content, is lower than the material we are replacing. And that is a key element that justifies our product market fit, without which we would have a hard time scaling. And to go back to what we mentioned in the introduction, that has been one of the difficulties for many plant-based alternatives, meaning I don't have the price positioning that allows me to be economically efficient and therefore enter these mass catering markets, which are very deep but very price sensitive.
Something we managed to do thanks to some quite unique specificities in this market.
The other aspects, the fact that it is produced in France, that the environmental impact is obviously lower, that contributes to the decision making of these food industry players.
It contributes to the decision-making process and the momentum they can have on these offers.
Where the decision making really happens is on things that are much more pragmatic and concrete. For example, in catering, in collective catering more broadly, the subject of price that I mentioned is really the first subject discussed, since it is constrained by a budget. So we have no choice but to reason based on that. The subject of the processability of the ingredient is extremely important. The first people we convinced, beyond the dietitians, for example, in institutional catering, are the chefs who implement it. And the subject of the industrial practicality of our ingredient is really key in the decision-making processes. We have an ingredient that is perfectly ready to use, so it integrates very easily into institutional kitchens or food processing plants.
What does it look like? Is it like ground meat, or it has the same texture?
It looks like cooked ground meat. That's how you can visualize it: a soft, fairly dark grain with a nice aroma, a bit of umami, a few.
Do you still need to cook it? Do you need to grill it, or not even?
That. It is completely ready to use. So if you want the industrial process,
it's like grated Gruyere. I mean, you add it at the end.
You add it to a tomato sauce, and you have a plant-based bolognese rich in protein. So this is of use. That plays a big role.
And to get back to the decision-making processes, what is at stake here is a shift toward plant-based options. In France, the EGalim law requires public catering services to provide at least one plant-based meal per week. So there is a regulatory context driving this, in addition to consumer expectations and the desire of groups to reduce their environmental impact. And all the agri-food groups have identified that minimizing the use of beef was the main way to reduce the environmental impact of their company. So we are often part of this movement. Well, that is what justifies these players' search for plant-based alternatives. And then comes an analysis of the entire range, where we stand out for nutritional values, the industrial practicality of using the ingredient, and economic efficiency in terms of cost of use.
How do you view the current debates regarding these new players, these meat analogs, these meat substitutes, where there have been discussions in Brussels about the possibility for these players to use terms usually attributed to or reserved for the meat industry? I get the feeling you are completely outside of these discussions. It's not really your subject. Do you have a take on that?
Yes, that concerns us. If you liked, it remains our sector. In fact, compared to a player like Happivore, Hura, etc., all these players who make meat alternatives, we have an ingredient supplier model.
And who use the terms bacon, sausage.
Like plant-based sausage, plant-based steak. They have a consumer-facing logic around the use of these words, something that, as a business-to-business ingredient seller, concerns us a little less. That said, it remains our sector. My perception of all this is that we have a government and policies that are very contradictory, a little bit schizophrenic. In the France 2030 plans, there is a focus on building a more sustainable food system, on the plant-based shift in our diet, and a desire to fund companies that create these offerings, which help move in that direction. So it is written into the very highest level of the state's strategy. And then at the same time, we are putting spokes in the wheels of the players who are democratizing these uses by constraining them on the terminology of the words they can use. So there is a form of paradox that is also what makes, the beauty of our French culture, which is sometimes very attached to these principles. Concretely, I find it a shame. It is quite sterile. I think as a debate, let the language evolve just as the offer evolves. Well, we need words to represent them.
And at the same time, there are regions that are currently suffering, and that also contribute to the economic attractiveness of the territories, or at least the economic life of certain regions.
Of course, one thing is certain, they are not suffering from the growth and penetration of these offerings in the market. As I was telling you, it barely accounts for 1% of the market share. So the issue is not that these plant-based offerings are starting to take too much share from meat. That is not the reason why, certain areas of the meat industry are struggling. To go back to what you mentioned about whether this concerns us and how we take a stand on that, it is not in our corporate culture to be in conflict or on the attack against the meat industry. On the contrary, in our sales pipeline, we find many major industrial meat leaders, and our goal is rather to collaborate with this industry. So that is something that can also differentiate us in our more tactical and philosophical approach to our mission in the market. We have projects with agribusinesses for hybridization, which means partial plant-based integration. Concretely, this means creating a ready-made meal containing both ground meat and our ingredient. So we are not entirely substituting the meat. We might only substitute 30% of it. This is part of a gradual plant-based shift. And these are things we have no trouble doing, which allow us to collaborate with the meat industry to help minimize their environmental impact. Because every ton we can substitute with our ingredient, well, that is how we create environmental impact. Rather than opposing them and refusing to speak with them, we chose to work with them to help them make their offerings more plant-based, since they are part of this movement and have an interest in doing so.
Let's talk about your industrialization strategy. You have a tight capital expenditure strategy. What does that mean in concrete terms?
Our technology, as I was telling you, is based on quite advanced scientific foundations, stemming from partnerships with the best research laboratories in Europe, those of AgroParisTech. In this case, Centrale Supélec. It is protected by a patent. The industrial choice we made, unlike many other deep tech companies, was to execute it at an industrial scale using standard hardware, meaning equipment found in many other food industries, whereas most deep tech companies like us create custom specific equipment. And that makes a fundamental difference in how we built our industrial model. Since, we can find fairly inexpensive equipment, we can have it financed through leasing, as we would very easily find buyers for it in other industries. It is equipment that is already widely proven, which is available in the catalogs of many manufacturers, which we can order easily and receive quickly. It is a robust equipment that works with good automation modules. So we do not need to put highly qualified operators on it. We do not need to invent very expensive Industry 4.0 type tools that may have been used by companies like Insect, for example. So this choice to use existing standard industry equipment and repurpose it to run our innovative hedonization technology allows us an efficient industrial path, light on capital expenditure, and faster. That is what justifies the fact that we are already delivering the first tons to clients at a pre-industrial scale on our pilot after only 3 years since the company's creation, which is a short time for a market launch for a deep tech. And that also explains why, for the rest of our industrial scale-up, we have very little scaling risk because most of the transfer work is already behind us, and we are able to ramp up to intense industrial production scales, counting in thousands of tons with financing needs that are relatively limited compared to other peers in this industry.
And you've had this strategy since the pre-seed stage. It's clear to you. Has it evolved? Have the resounding failures, you mentioned Insect recently, have they changed the strategy?
It is something that inspired us immediately, and that was a choice from the very first days of thinking about the industrial transfer. We felt in 2023 and 2024, given the economic and financial context of the market, that anything we could do to streamline our industrial system and scale up this technology, bringing it to market while minimizing our funding needs, would be decisive for our development. So we looked for every possible way to achieve this, indeed, inspired by companies that had made different choices and that had built industrial systems that were much more capital expenditure intensive. That clearly played a role, yes, in our thinking, in the development of our strategy. So that was something hard that required a lot of creativity and inventiveness, because repurposing existing equipment presents significant technological challenges. And today we feel it is paying off, and that it creates a fundamental difference in our model compared to others.
When we listen to you, we get the feeling that the business is quite infinite, and that a huge number of players in the agri-food industry would benefit from adopting this solution. Doesn't that push you? Doesn't that make you want to accelerate and move forward quickly?
Yes, absolutely. The goal for us is to move quickly on industrialization, to lock in our first clients and continue to build a technological lead to seize this opportunity. And the choice to have an agile, rapid industrialization system that requires little capital is also in line with this, thinking that by being agile, fast, and needing less capital, we will be able to move faster and therefore preempt this market before competitors arrive.
There are competitors in other countries who are doing the same thing as you?
Well, they do exist. Today, paradoxically, our most direct competitors from a commercial standpoint are not microalgae companies. We tend to compete commercially more with other companies working on other materials, other microorganisms, microproteins, fungi proteins, things like that, rather than microalgae companies. That said, yes, there are players, I'm thinking of one in Israel, for example, that works with technological logic somewhat similar to ours, aiming to create texture and taste using spirulina. So there are competitors working with our same logic, not yet close enough to be in real commercial competition. In this case, this company is focusing more on fish alternatives, which is a bit less our playing field. So we have enough room to find our markets for now, but we anticipate, as you were saying, the desire of some manufacturers to position themselves on these materials. So we are trying to be fast and efficient in our industrial ramp-up to prevent that.
Actually, as we speak, it is March and you are in the middle of a Series A roadshow. Do the funds you are talking to understand the potential? Are they, how should I put it, impacted by the fact that we are in a downturn in the alternative protein sector? What is the reception?
If you like, the first analytical framework is the market size.
Our market is that of ready-to-use business-to-business protein ingredients. So in concrete terms, it is everything chefs and manufacturers use to compose a prepared meal. It could be ground meat, raw legumes, as you mentioned, tofu cubes, all these pieces, these protein pieces. That is a $400 billion market worldwide. It is a massive market, so it has infinite depth. And the desire to use high potential plant-based materials is a reality in these markets because, well, all the major trends, the consumer expectations for more naturalness, for more protein richness, you may have seen this wave of high protein claims are perfectly aligned with our value proposition. So the fact that we have a proposal that fits such a big market is the first thing an investor will look at. And then concretely, what speaks for us is the satisfaction level of our first clients. The fact that we managed to fit deep markets with leaders, with food industry leaders, by just being on effective pricing for them in an industrial logic. These are things that contribute to reassuring. That coupled with our industrial model, which is now de-risked, well, that is what justifies the investor's interest in our case.
You pitch well, but there must be some areas of risk nonetheless.
Of course. In fact, like any industrial company, we have risks regarding, for example, the alignment of the various roadmaps. Today, that is part of the difficulties we face as entrepreneurs, having to align a sourcing roadmap, finding the raw material we need to process and aligning it with the industrial roadmap. Concretely, scaling up our system means building factories with complex, sometimes risky schedules, where there can be execution risk in setting up a factory. These are complex industrial projects, especially when it comes to innovation. With the commercial roadmap, managing this demand with a rhythm that is fully aligned with our ability to deliver and with our financial roadmap, since we need to raise funds right now as we are at the stage of building our factory. So our Series A coincides with this moment. aligning these roadmaps is something that is complex to manage. That is what makes an industrial scale-up project so difficult, managing to grow all these dimensions at the same time with coherence.
So everything is not simple when scaling up.
And the funds that dropped the deal, what did they tell you?
There are funds that are afraid of this alternative protein theme because they have seen startups fail, and there have been many. So we understand perfectly those that have failed in recent years. For us, if you like, we are very clear about our strategy and our reading. In fact, there was a huge hype cycle, a lot of promises, a lot of money raised, and then promises that did not necessarily deliver. So many companies went under, and many investors, as a result, tripped up on this subject and are now wary and prefer to direct their investment toward other less risky themes. We think this is the ideal time to build billion-dollar companies in this field because after this hype cycle, we are now seeing a recovery with all the lessons from the previous decade on what worked less well, and on consumer expectations that are now much clearer and easier to read, and also a form of maturity regarding industrial systems that we can think about in a more efficient and coherent way. So we can see that the revival of this new generation of plant-based offerings relies on microorganisms. And between late 2025 and early 2026, we saw many great fundraising rounds from players offering these types of healthy plant-based products to the market. So we are part of that movement, and we have seen this type of cycle in many other industries that in climate tech or during the dot-com bubble, where we saw rapid hype, market downturns, and then recoveries on healthier foundations that ultimately delivered the true leaders that mattered for decades.
We are convinced that we are precisely at that moment. Some investors do not see it, do not believe in it, and we respect that. Others feel it too. And that is what we are having discussions about, particularly interesting discussions.
What has happened over the last 3 years that surprised you? What have you learned that changed the way you manage Edonia?
The very rapid evolution of the market and consumer expectations.
When you bet that the naturalness of our ingredient will be something that sets us apart, that will generate commercial appeal, at the moment we start discussing our offer with clients, it is not yet a reality. In 2024, we have players telling us, for me, using 10, 12 ingredients in my product, I'm still comfortable doing that.
It is true that the topic of ultra-processing has exploded in the media.
It exploded in a way that was very aligned with our market launch. So these are things that were fundamental to the evolution and to achieving our product market fit. Because today, when you go back to see that same agri-food company, the conversation has completely changed. It is, yes, I understand that the consumer does not necessarily expect me to mimic meat, and that I am better off offering a more natural product, even if it does not specifically resemble the substance I am trying to substitute. So you have these movements of research by agri-food companies into ingredients that are driven by evolving consumer expectations. Well, yes, you have to deal with this changing environment. In this case, we were well positioned for that. So these are things that pay off, but we are very alert to the market's ability to turn around. Food trends, perhaps contrary to what one might perceive, change extremely fast. In the United States, the emergence of GLP-1 or Ozempic, all these slimming diets has shaken up the food industry like rarely seen in history. So we are very attentive to these major market shifts, which actually transform the briefs of marketing directors in these large industrial groups and consequently change the research frameworks for R&D directors, who are our sales prospects, regarding the ingredients they are looking for. So yes, it is this shift in expectations that we are very attentive to, and which can change things for us.
Yes, because you are truly at the intersection of several mega trends. And what I understand is that naturalness could also be one on a global level. Are the United States also moving massively toward the search for naturalness?
Absolutely, it is. It is becoming a consumer expectation, and there are some very strong market elements, notably some success cases of alternative proteins that are making these plays, of really making proposals in this direction, and which are currently outperforming. So yes, it is a reality that goes well beyond France and was even initiated in the United States. That is often the direction it takes, by the way. It was the same with the high protein wave, which started in the United States and then reached Europe. So it is often in that direction that things have evolved.
And do investors challenge you on the team composition, on the complementarity of expertise? We haven't talked about it much, but do you feel you're convincing enough on that? And will you be keen to go and seek new expertise in the next fundraising?
We still have a lot to do in terms of team building. Actually, we are growing quite strongly in that area. We have done a lot of hiring. We are anticipating the first hires post-closing, Series A closing. And regarding the team, if you will, beyond its depth and size, the first point we were very attentive to was creating complementarity, starting with the leadership trio. Well, I have more of a business background, and I am partners with Pierre, who has an operations background and is the CEO in charge of structuring and finance. He cut his teeth at Danone and Unilever in large agri-food groups within supply teams, dealing with managing factory activities and launching food innovations. So he has a background in those operations roles. And then we are partners with Nicolas, who has a scientific background, a graduate of AgroParis Tech, and who has already developed food ingredients from microorganisms at Les Affres, which is a major leader in the sector. So we look for complementarity through our trio of leaders, quite classically, business, operations, and science, which are the right skills to mobilize to create a deep tech company with an industrial scale-up model. And we strive to recruit the best possible talent in all aspects of our company: the industrialization side, the scientific side, and now increasingly the business and operation sides.
I'd like to ask you a question. If you were a climate tech investor, what would you look for if you received about 100 applications a month like we do? What would you really want to look at? And what questions would you ask the entrepreneurs?
Well, I would look at the measurability of the company's environmental impact. If the goal of the investment is to create environmental impact, I would ask the entrepreneurs about their ability to measure that impact concretely. I think I would focus on the fact that the company's activity affects the real world. So in my opinion, for that, you need physical objects. Industrial systems offers that, that are truly rooted in the physical reality of our planet. And then perhaps I would look at the balance between economic efficiency and environmental efficiency. I think that if these two axes are aligned, if the company creates environmental impact, a beneficial effect on the climate in a way that is very aligned with how it creates economic value, that is fertile ground for efficiency.
So that is the potential of the solution, but the team still needs to be able to execute it. And how would you analyze the team?
As for the team, I would try to look at the collaboration processes and how tasks are divided within the leadership team. I would also try to gauge the perception of the teams they manage to get a sense of how they feel about being managed by them. I think I would also test their convictions and their longer-term vision to see in which direction they want to take the company. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I would do. And then I think I would spend a lot of time interviewing the company's clients. Some investors do that for us. We are lucky to have that relationship with our clients, to be able to ask them to talk to the investors. And in general, that is where we find moments of truth. It's when our clients describe in their own words how they perceive the offer. quite differently than a polished pitch that I might from my side, for example. That's usually where we hit the truth of why the company exists, of why the offer we bring to market is a fit with the expectations of our target clients.
Knowing that clients are sometimes a bit briefed, as you just said, I mean, there is always the risk of knowing to what extent the client is speaking freely. Would you also call the competitors?
Yes, why not? To ask how they differentiate themselves from the company and what their perception is, what the perception of the offer is.
Okay. Is there a topic we haven't covered that you would have liked to cover today?
Do you have any in mind? I'm thinking.
No, maybe just internationalization. Was France a good market to start in? Or did you realize that there were other markets that were perhaps more advanced? And how do you perceive internationalization in 2030? What does Edonia look like?
We consider ourselves a European company with an international ambition. That is the point of making such innovative technology, of filing patents in different territories and having a model, a scalable model. It is to be able to think of one's market as a global market. And that is really our case. Our industrialization today is in France. Our industrial pilot is there. Our future factory will be in France. So we keep a French DNA, and that is the case for the industrial side. That is not the case for the commercial side. We are already in a mindset of much international commercialization. We have a pipeline where France obviously carries weight due to the native network effect and the ease of connection. We did start in French markets, but today, among our prospects and even our clients, we have players in the UK, Switzerland, and Germany, so in other European markets, as well as our first non-European initiative in Japan, which has a cultural particularity. In Japan, they consume more seaweed than we consume lettuce in France, to give you an idea of the scale. So that gives our offering a slightly different interpretation.
But no microalgae, at least not.
Mostly macroalgae, but the openness to the idea of eating seaweed has nothing to do with what we might have here in Europe. So there you go. For that reason, we targeted Europe and Japan as our first development territories. And then subsequently, post-Series A, we have ambitions for other markets in the Middle East, in the United States, and then to expand in Asia, around Japan. We identified Japan as the most promising country for Asia.
Post-Series A, does that mean you already have a country manager in Japan? How do you...
No, today we work with partners in these market areas. So we have a partner service provider with offices in Japan that co-executes sales prospecting with us and helps us build this cultural bridge, this logistical bridge. So you can see it as an outsourced country manager almost, which we believe is the right approach to start testing export markets, to prime things with a view to perhaps later indeed opening offices or even setting up factories with local partners. That is how we view our long-term international expansion. It is about replicating these hedonization units in geographical areas that have, excellent microalgae cultivation hubs and above all, markets that are also in demand for this type of ingredient. So Edonia, in 10-15 years, we imagine it like these hubs of hedonization attached to microalgae cultivation hubs in different areas of the world in South America.
Do you have an example of a company that went international like that?
And that you could, quote unquote, not replicate, but that you could draw inspiration from the playbook?
It is a model that is quite executed by many companies, industrial companies that have the challenge of being close to the biomass that they use. So without naming specific examples, it is true for many industries that need to be close to some kind of biomass, wood, algae, or certain materials to say, actually, we will position factories as close as possible to our source of raw materials, and we replicate it either ourselves by setting up our own factories or through joint ventures with local partners. So it is a development path that interests us. We are in discussions with Japanese players to that effect, saying, let's cooperate a plant in the area where we would bring our own protected technology and we would rely on the partner's financial and operational strength to set it up, run it, and distribute the products that come out of it.
Right. Thanks, Hugo.
Thank you very much. Great talking to you.
See you very soon.
See you soon.